The gospel of Jesus Christ is this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's Genesis 1:1. And in the beginning, you see that you have all of God there. God the Father. And then the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the face of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So you see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit there creating the earth. And then what you see is as he goes through the 6 days of creation, he creates pairs of equal opposites with different roles. You see on day 1, he creates light and darkness. Day 2, he creates the water above and the water below. Day 3, sea and dry land, and so on. On day 6, you see that God creates humankind. He creates Adam. And Adam is told to be fruitful and multiply. And Adam, with this perfect relationship he has with God, he is naming the animals and doing the work in the garden. But God says, if you noticed in the text, in the creation in chapter 1, there is no equal opposite pair for him. In the retelling of day 6 in chapter 2, we see that to create the equal opposite, God puts Adam to sleep, and he takes a rib and he forms woman out of the rib. And he brings the woman to Adam, and Adam says, "She will be called woman, for she is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." And so you see in this perfect creation that God has created all this. And in addition, in Genesis chapter 2, you see that God breathes the breath of life into them. This is the eternal soul that lives on. Distinctly different creation from all the other animals. We have this breath of life, the soul that God has given us. And so you see in creation, he set up all the perfect order. Marriage is for one man and one woman to be fruitful and multiply, how they're supposed to tend the garden. All the order of all the world is set in Genesis 1 and 2. And in this perfect relationship we have with God and perfect relationship that they had with each other, the distinct difference is God gave us free will. He gave humankind free will. Had he not given us free will, we would just be robots. We'd be C-3PO without the ability to choose, right? Because of free will, because of love in free will, we have the ability to choose. So that's the setup. He created all these things for human flourishing, perfect relationship. In Genesis chapter 3, that relationship is put to the test. It says this, Genesis 3:1, "Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the animals the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, 'Did God really say you cannot eat from the tree of the garden?' And the woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden. But the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat it or touch it, or you will surely die.' 'No, you will not certainly die,' the serpent said to the woman. 'In fact, God knows that the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good from evil.' So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, delightful to look at, and it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. So she took some of the fruit and ate it, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. And the eyes of them were both opened, and they knew that they were naked, so that they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves." What did Satan do? He created doubt. Did God really say? Then he puts it in the mind, you can be like God. You can break that relationship and make your own rules and do it your own way always. So when we see them fall into temptation, those things, the tree was good for food, it was delightful to look at it, and it was desirable to make one wise. Peter calls that the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the sinful pride of life. And in the moment when they sin in this way, one sin makes you separated from a perfect and holy God. That perfect relationship is broken for now and for eternity. So you're headed on a crash course to death and eternal separation from God. That is a painful, ugly truth that our sin does. From the moment that Adam and Eve sin, every human being through their DNA is infected with this sin thing, forever to be separated from God. That's the beginning of the gospel. Relationship perfect, being broken. Genesis 3:15 says this, "But I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between her offspring and your offspring. And he will strike your head, and you will strike his heel." This is the first promise. The picture looks like this. He's talking to the woman. You will give birth to God's son, the virgin birth. And it looks like, imagine a snake on the ground, and Jesus' heel stomping that. But in that, Jesus dies. This is the promise. And God gives this promise because he loves his people so much, even though they're separated and they can't be with him. God's purpose from this time on is to restore that relationship. And all through the Old Testament, all the prophecy that leads to Jesus is telling of the story of what God's going to do for our redemption to restore this relationship. So when Jesus is born, all man and all God, and lives this perfect life, and he has to be all God and all man, because even a perfect man could only atone for himself. Because he is all God and all man, he can atone for all time. And when Jesus is marching to Golgotha to be put on the cross, remember in the Gospel of John he says, "Nobody takes my life, I lay it down." So when Jesus is spread out on the cross, and he says the words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In that moment, God turned his back on the Son and exacted the punishment for all sin that needed to be punished. Mine and yours. Our sin was punished in the way it needs to be punished to make satisfaction for the Father for the sins that we have committed. The earth went dark. From all eternity past, never having been separated, Jesus was separated from the Father for our behalf. The punishment was exacted. And in the moment that Jesus, after that, says, "It is finished," it is finished. This is a Greek word. The Greek word is tetelestai. And it is a term that's used for accounting, meaning your spreadsheet of sin has been brought to zero and continues to be at zero. It means that it's a war term, that the battle is won and it continues to always be won. And then Jesus yields his spirit and he dies. Jesus has conquered sin. And on the third day he raises again to show that he conquered death. The punishment we exacted and the death and separation is paid for and bought for us by Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. And sometimes we overcomplicate this gospel, but the Lord Christ makes it so simple. In the book of Romans, chapter 1, it says this, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of salvation to everyone who believes, first the Jew and then the Greek." The power of salvation comes through belief. Every other world religion except for biblical Christianity says you have to work to get to God. You have to be good enough, you have to do enough, you have to do something. No, biblical Christianity says God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit did the work and paid the price so you can come to God freely and openly with all your stuff, accept who he is as Lord, receive his forgiveness, and live a free life and look forward to your resurrection with the Father. All that is required for belief, for salvation, is your belief. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ in its entirety, in its simplicity.